Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I am Angelica Marino, and I am the Stewardship Manager of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's online webinar, Honoring Our Heroes and the Impact of the Military Community on the Financial Services Industry. As we wait for folks to sign on, we have a few announcements to share. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please enter them into the Q&A function at the bottom on your Zoom screen. If time allows, we will have a Q&A session toward the end of the webinar and try to answer as many questions as we can. It is my pleasure to turn it over to Phil Easton, our Managing Director of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Angelica. I want to begin by extending a warm welcome to all of our attendees. Today we come together to honor the importance of Veterans Day, which commemorates the service and sacrifice of our heroes, and discuss the military community's impact on the financial services industry and community with Major General Suzanne, she lets me call her Zan, Vautrinot, our esteemed 2024 Soldier Citizen Award recipient. I'll share more about this prestigious award a little bit later. As we know, on this past Monday was Veterans Day. The 11th of November is Veterans Day, a federal holiday meant to honor all veterans of the uniformed services who served or are still serving during times of peace and war. Veterans Day began in 1919 when President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed the first Armistice Day to be celebrated on November 11th because World War I ended on the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. In 1954, Congress changed Armistice Day to Veterans Day to honor and include service members who have served in all of our nation's wars. I'd like to point out, Veterans Day celebrates the service of all U.S. military veterans, while Memorial Day, a federal holiday on the last Monday in May, honors those who have perished while in military service. As mentioned earlier, we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Major General Suzanne Vautrinot, our 2024 Soldier Citizen Award recipient and our first female recipient. This award celebrates military leadership, industry success, and a greatness of American society. The recipient is recognized as someone who has protected the freedoms of our society in the armed forces and subsequently enhanced society as a citizen. Congratulations, Zan, and you are so deserving of this award. And let me tell the audience why. General Vautrinot served our nation for 31 years and was critical to the development of cyberspace as an operational domain within the military. She was instrumental in the establishment and early operation of U.S. Cyber Command, with responsibility for offensive and defensive cyber activities for the Department of Defense. She is president of Kilovolt Consulting Incorporated and currently serves on the boards of directors for Wells Fargo, Ecolab, CSX, Parsons, Battelle Memorial Institute, and City of Hope. Welcome, General Vautrinot, and congratulations again. Thank you for your time. I know you're super busy. I know right now you're in Columbus, Ohio at Battelle, which is the world's largest nonprofit for applied science and technology. Can you tell us a little bit of why you're there at Battelle? And I want to give you the opportunity to give some opening comments.
Thanks so much, Phil. Yeah, I'm a board member, very privileged to be part of the board of Battelle Memorial Institute. They're all about scientific discovery and then translation of that discovery for social benefit. So I can't imagine another place in the world where I could hear about Neurolife, which is the chip in the brain that can change the world for somebody with Parkinson's or stroke or a paraplegic. At the same time, we're talking adaptive emissivity and self-healing concrete and bioelectronics and quantum microscopes. Yesterday, a whole bunch on micromodular reactors, so that you can take big capabilities into small parts of our nation. And the national labs are such a treasure. So it's been exciting. Equally exciting that I'm helping you recognize Veterans Day much better than you recognizing me on Memorial Day, as you mentioned. It's good to be alive, and even better to be with you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And obviously, you're doing some great things there with Battelle Memorial Institute and all the different efforts and boards that you're on. So well deserved being our soldier citizen for 2024. We look forward to continue working with you in the future. So as we get into our questions, and for the crowd, we're going to break up half of this webinar and talking about Veterans Day, service and sacrifice. And then the second half, we're going to talk about the great award and the purpose of the award, which is to recognize and the great accomplishments that she has in the military, but also great in the financial services industry. And we're going to talk about how our military are the perfect fit for financial services, if you want to be an advisor or just be in the industry. So we're going to break this up into two parts. So the first part, when we talk about Veterans Day and you talk about your personal journeys, and first question is, what inspired you to join the Air Force, and how has your service shaped your perspective on leadership and sacrifice?
So opportunity is a wonderful thing. And when I was a junior in high school, suddenly the Air Force Academy, as well as the other military academies, were opened to women. And if you look back at that time, women couldn't serve in combat, but suddenly we were allowed and engaged into the military academies. I applied to the Air Force Academy because the Air Force had already changed a huge number of its job descriptions to allow women to serve in those instances. So it was just a great opportunity, and you heard so much about it because it was brand new. So great big opportunity, a little bit of willingness to take a risk on something that was new. And the next thing you knew, I was marching up the, wait for it, bring me men ramp into the United States Air Force Academy, and just terrific opportunities after that in both space and cyber. You asked how it shaped, my view of leadership and my view of sacrifice. And I tell you that leadership is sacrifice. It's not about the accoutrements, and it's not about people listening to what you say. It is about being there for the nation as a higher calling, and being there whenever they ask. It's an assignment. You don't wake up one morning and say, I think I'd like to do this. The military assigns you to their needs, and they ask you to go places that may not have been first or even last on your list. And that's where you go. And the more senior you get in the military, the more there's an expectation that if your people need you for something, if that's 2 o'clock in the morning, or it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or whenever it is, or whatever it is, your job is to be there for them and remove barriers so that they can get the mission done. And same thing for their families, to be there for them when someone is deployed, and making sure that so it really is saying, this is more important than anything that I might personally choose in that moment, or more largely. And it's a sacrifice that gives back every single day.
No, I love that you said that leadership is sacrifice, right? And I haven't heard that before, but each and every military member, right? Whether you're E1 and O10, doesn't matter. You are leading, right? You're leading in
Absolutely.
whatever capacity. You're leading your peers. As you move up in rank, you're leading your subordinates. And as we lead each other, right? I mean, even though I was an E9, there was plenty of lower ranking folks that led me and allowed me to get to the positions that I was blessed to be able to get into as well. And it is a sacrifice. There's a sacrifice of time, commitment, being away from home, being away, missing birthday parties. I mean, we just live a different life that the only 1% of the American population actually has experienced. So I really appreciate that. And one of the other things within my second question, we're very passionate in the military about mentorship, right? And when you think about it, and we make comments all the time about iron sharpening iron. And the one I love the most is, lift as you climb, right? So even as you continue to rise up into the rank that you, as a major general and over the cyber course, and there are folks that, helped you along this journey. So my question is, within the realm of mentorship, who were some of your mentors in the military, and how did they influence your approach to service?
Yeah, I was so fortunate in terms of people that were willing to take the time to make me a heck of a lot better than I started out. My very first boss, I went into an organization, now you'd say National Reconnaissance Office, but at the time we said Secretary of the Air Force Special Projects, because it was an obfuscation of the fact that it was the National Reconnaissance Office, which was also obfuscating the fact that we were flying spy satellites. So very unique organization. And my boss, CC Albert, was the two of us together made up 100% of the women in that organization. And when I walked in the first day, I was a baby lieutenant. They had no other second lieutenant. So I'm a baby second lieutenant. So junior that they put newspaper down in my office because like puppies, lieutenants aren't trained. Everyone here knows that. But she said to me, Zan, do you know the difference between personal and professional criticism? Because you're going to get a whole lot of the latter. And the perspective was so perfect for a brand new lieutenant that was going to get lots of guidance, that it is professional criticism. And you should absorb that, you should seek it out. And it taught me that that was so important through the rest of my career. Buzz Carpenter, much later in my career, he was one of the first SR-71 guys. He was my boss over in Europe at USAF. This was a guy that had more on his plate than anyone can possibly imagine. And so I'd walk in and you just wanted to serve him. I mean, I would have worked, any number of hours, way past midnight, just to make it work for him because he was that good a leader. But if you walked into his office with a question or a problem, all of those myriad of things that were so much bigger than my pissy little whatever it was were gone. And he absolutely focused on you, focused on me and my issue, and he solved it in real time. The phone call that needed to be made or the approval that needed to be done, he was with you in that moment. And I have tried to emulate that. And I think emulate is the right word, because every one of these people I'm talking about, it wasn't what they told me, it's what they showed me. And there's something about watching people do things well. Having somebody tell you not to do something bad is irrelevant. Watching people do it right and then emulating that. Another one was Bill Looney, who I know you know and have worked with before. He created organizations around him, and we used to call it Camelot, because it really was the round table. And if there was anyone that came in, and this is a pretty senior level, and in some organizations, you'll get the people that are kind of toxic, or they make someone else look bad so they can look good, or they take somebody else's ideas and try to purport them off. But we've all met those kinds of people. Bill Looney was extraordinary at recognizing team dynamic and encouraging only the most positive dynamic. And so working in his organizations really was like being in Camelot, and you could get so much more done as a result. It was phenomenal. And then you get other people that it's not the great big things like Camelot, it's the little ideas. Bill Jones taught me how to speak in front of people. He said, and he always started with Vautrinot. Vautrinot, have I taught you nothing? And then it would be followed with guidance. And the first thing he told me is lose the notes, because they're getting in the way of your connection with who you're trying to convey something to. And the second thing was, particularly because I'm female, my voice is a little higher than others. And because I'm from California, a little faster. And so he said, on the way to work, when you're going to speak, listen to the radio and repeat after the announcer. You lower your voice an octave and repeat after them in the same pace. And that will get you in the right pace in order to be able to speak. So everything from the big ideas about how to take guidance or how to create a truly cohesive team to the small mentorship that says, you can do a better job of these things. all of them incredibly important, and I hold them dear to this day.
Oh, that's awesome. You gave an example of 4 different mentors throughout your career. And I love your statement saying it's not what they told you, it's what they showed you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And so it's their actions, right? And their character. And they taught you about sacrifice and service,
Mhm.
right? The things that General Looney showed you and the other examples, CC Albert, Buzz, etc. They showed you how to serve and take care of people. And you worked the rest of your career after you learned that,
Yeah.
do the same and replicate it and emulate it. And that's why it's important to have a mentor. You know, mentors aren't always I think about my wall of fame over my 32-year career, and I think about the 6 people that I talk about all the time. These weren't people that I even necessarily asked to be my mentor, right? Some
Right.
were. One was of the 6, but the other ones were just they did it by their actions. So you know what? I want when I grow up, I want to be just like that person because of how they make me feel and how they treat people with dignity and respect. So
Yeah.
mentorship.
Phil, before you go on to the next question, you say you want to be just like them. I found I used to advise my field graders as they became leaders, who are the 5 up and who are the 5 down. So who are the 5 people that you consider to be mentors? Who's your phone call? Your phone a friend to get advice or to get mentorship? And more importantly, who are the 5 people that are calling you? Because if nobody's calling you, you're not passing it both ways. And so I absolutely agree with you. It's got to go both ways.
100%. Love it. Love it. And when you think about the mentors of your career and you think about your career, 31 years, and you think about the legacy of the service that you and others have had, how do you think the sacrifices that we've been talking about of our veterans and our military and those still in uniform, how do they shape the identity of the nation, right? Even though we're just 1% that have served, for those Americans, we have a huge impact on the nation itself, even with those small numbers, based on our sacrifice and our service. So, how do you think those sacrifices made by veterans have shaped the identity of our nation?
Yeah, so I can't see the folks in the webinar, but I'm guessing if I ask the question, how many have served, even though it's 1% in the nation, the vast majority. And if if everyone has raised their hand, then they remember a different time that they raised their hand, and it was to take an oath. And that oath was to a calling to a vision for a nation. It's to the Constitution, not to an individual and not to a singular idea, but the idea of what we can be as a new nation. And the second thing about that oath is you take it freely without any mental reservation, which means you're all in. So you're all in everything about you to a big idea. So that's the first part of that sacrifice, because you've literally subordinated yourself to that bigger idea. And then you look at Veterans Day and celebrating first armistice and then the other wars. And those are not wars that occurred on our ground. There is hallowed ground all over the world that recognizes our veterans who've served. So the greater good became international and a global good. And we are recognized because we go and defend the freedoms of others, in addition to swearing that oath to our freedoms. And that is extraordinary to me. And it makes our nation something bigger than just a successful nation, a sovereign nation. It is an idea that goes global. And when people look at America and want to come to America, they're looking at what we created as veterans in that greater sacrifice.
No, love it. I mean, we talk about freedom's not free, right? So
Nope.
all the
Somebody
sacrifices,
paid for it,
um,
and it was all the people.
somebody paid for all the ones ahead of us, right?
Absolutely. Stand on
Um,
the shoulders of greatness.
100%, 100%. And, all in. That's what we are, right? That's
Absolutely.
regardless of the topic. We raised our hands to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And like you said, it's a much bigger calling than any individual. And it's not about any individual, it's about the Constitution.
Yeah, but
and
it
the
does shape
freedoms
the
of
way
our-
an individual thinks. It shapes the way the entire world thinks about us, which was your question. But it shapes the
Right.
way we think about what should we be doing in life. It's bigger.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. And you think about as we transition from the Veterans Day questions over into kind of the financial services questions, there's a lot of skills and there's a lot of individuals, especially the ones on this call, that are interested in the financial services industry. They may be in transition, which is a major focal point of the Center for Military and Veterans Affairs that I manage. And it's very important for us to make sure that those individuals have a smooth transition as much as possible with our free scholarships, with our free education, and the things that we provide. But I want to talk about some of the skills that we learn as being military members, whether it's a 4-year career or a 40-year career. You talked about leadership. We also are very good at decision making because whether you're, once again, E1 or O10, there's decisions, and we empower our service members, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and guardians, and our spouses, right, within those spaces, to be great decision makers. So within the realm of skills, leadership, and decision making, how does military training and experience influence decision making and leadership styles in the financial services sector?
So let me start with the overarching. In the military, what we do matters right now. There is a life in the balance. There is a mission in the balance. And so it's not, yeah, I'll kind of get around to it. There's this mission focus and immediacy that, especially in financial services, because when you look at it, the people you're supporting and the businesses you're supporting, whether it's consumer or a commercial, that is their future. It's existential for them. It is whether they have money to pay the bill and keep the lights on, or to get their kid through college, and it has to go right now, or in the commercial side, to run the business and to make payroll or to make the investment. Those are things that have immediacy. And we bring that with us in terms of that immediate focus on the mission, which is about individuals. It is about life. So right from the get-go, the way we approach it helps. But then the clarity of how we think about what we're going to do next. So we say strategy as though it's, oh yeah, it's table stakes. But when we say strategy, we mean we not only know where we want to go, we know what the underlying assumptions are that are taking us there. And we know, in our words, branches and sequels of, if something starts to go awry, I'm going to have a branch and sequel, because as we know, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So I need to know which way I may need to go, right down to understanding what the triggers are that tell you that might be about to happen, so that you're not that frog in cold water warming up slowly and getting cooked. You actually are making a decision when it needs to be made based on the appropriate triggers. Your assumptions have changed and you know it immediately. That's table stakes in our service time. It is not table stakes in the financial sector. Most of the time you find that when people say they're going to talk about a strategy, what they really mean is a goal with an operational plan. And it's not as fulsome. So you bring something unique. Same thing with professional development. When you and I say professional development, we know if we're bringing up the next level in the military behind us, we better do it exactly right. It's existential. If you don't train the folks after you to be you and be better than you, there is no place else to go to get them. So you either have a great professional development ability, and you have a way of looking at who are your high potentials, your high performers, so you can bring them into leadership positions and you can expand their knowledge base. That level of developing experts is also unique to the military. And again, the way that we differentiate between education and training and exercising, they're all levels of development of expertise and professionalism. But that level of doing it with that existential need is table stakes for us, very unusual in the private sector and in the financial sector. Same thing, everyone's had the Inspector General folks come in, big exercise, love to see them, glad you're here. That whole dynamic of being not only the preparation to be ready for them and have, T's crossed, I's dotted, all of that kind of stuff, and be ready to show exactly how good you are. That is in two pieces of financial services. It's in the controls and the internal audit piece, but it's also in the execution and the business resilience. So when we say corporate resilience or crisis response, we all know that as part of our, again, table stakes. We did it every single day. And yet the level of detail, it's not a tabletop, it's real life. Bringing that level of expertise in that area is something that is not the norm. So you look at all of those kinds of things, and then just your ability to react in crisis. We are resilient in an extraordinary way. And in the financial sector, things change, and they change globally and they change rapidly. That level of resilience, getting through the stages of grief that fast and moving on with a better plan, also unique to the military and absolutely essential to financial services, coming full circle, because what you're doing matters to individuals and consumers as well as all the businesses you support. And if you're not able to make that turn really rapidly, you are undermining their ability to succeed. So in all of those ways, uniquely able to make a difference.
No, I love that. That means all the experiences we're going through, whether we realize it or not, during our 40-year career, is setting us up for perfect jobs just like this in the financial sector. Like you said, you just gave tons of examples of how we've been put in decision-making situations and how we've learned and we've gotten better and then we've excelled. Like you said, during exercises, just during day-to-day, me being an aircraft maintainer, right? Making decisions, whether this aircraft is aircraft worthy, to take off and the things associated with it. All those things set you up. And we need these type of skills in the financial services industry. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're helping individuals with their lives and their decisions and their finances, which is one of the most important things that we have, in helping them make the right decisions or recommending the right decisions associated.
And you said the example you used, is this thing ready to take off, or is this satellite, or is this launch vehicle ready to go up? Making that decision, the candor with which we look at it, is and express it. There's no, well, kind of, sort of, and it's really all of our problem, not my problem. We own it. We're taught that you own it. You own the go, no go. And the candor with which you communicate that, or the strength with which you say, no, we're not ready and we're going to fix this first, is extraordinary and absolutely necessary across the private sector, but especially in financial services.
Yeah, 100%. And if I can pull the string on that, what additional skills do you think? And so we've talked about candor, we've talked about leadership, we've talked about decision making, we've talked about service sacrifice. But if they're, character is very important. What are some of the either tangible or non-tangible or soft or hard is probably a better way to say it. Soft and or hard skills do you think that we learn in the military that could be very transferable over to the financial services sector?
Well, there's so many. So let me encapsulate them in a thought. Lifelong learning. We are asked at each stage to learn more, to delve deeper and become an expert. And at the same time, as we become more senior in our area, we are asked to do things that are outside of what we might have learned in a technical school or at each level of training. So you learn about personnel, you learn about the financials, you learn about programmatics, you learn all of those things. And in each of those cases, it takes study and it takes dedication and it takes wanting to be an expert in all of those things that you're now responsible for. So both that depth in terms of being willing to study and become the expert, as well as the breadth and the willingness to be a lifelong learner and treat all of those things as incredibly important to make a greater whole. Those two things together expressed in everything that you're getting in the training. So I know in the college, there are any number of financial specificities that you look at, or you look at trusting, and you know, all of those things, counterparty risk, the details. It's not those details so much as it is the willingness to dive deep and become an expert, and at the same time learn across so you can connect the dots and provide the service, because it's financial services, which has to lean across all of those areas of expertise.
No, and that falls right in line. You talk about dedication and doing your homework and the things that we've done in the military. Why is that important in financial services? Because the stats are, right?
Yep.
90% of those that come into financial services don't make it into financial service, military or not, right?
Yeah.
Another 5% make it to the 5-year mark, and that's no longer. So only additional 5% that come into financial services actually are long-term advisors. It's because it's difficult. You got to have the dedication. You got to
Yeah.
work on your book of business. You got to work on your clientele. You have to know your stuff. And that's why I love the attributes and the skills that we learn as military fit right in line. We have the stick to it-ness, right? If that's
Yeah.
even a word, right? We have that and that dedication associated with it. That's why I know we are a perfect fit for those that are passionate about helping others,
Yeah.
which we all are. That's just how we were born and bred,
Yeah.
and in the military, and how we have the dedication to stick with this particular career field.
Yeah, and you can't teach that kind of thing. Yeah, it's got to be in your DNA.
Mhm.
It crawls into our DNA from basic training all the way through. I think you'd probably find anyone in any bank around the country who says you can't teach that kind of attitude.
100%. So as we talk about, bridging the gap between the financial services industry and the military, right? This question is a little bit of what we've talked about, but maybe we can pull a string on that. When it comes to our military professionals, how can our military professionals bridge the gap between their unique experiences, and we've talked a little bit about that, and the expectations of the financial services industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's nothing worse than somebody comes in and tells you that the other company did it better. Yeah, but you don't know anything about our company, so why don't you learn that first? I think that's the first part. Is we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen carefully, and people will describe challenges and problems. And because you have a unique skill set coming from the military, you're able to help solve those. So instead of saying, I know this better, let me help you solve that. I think I might be able to help you solve that. And because you bring a set of skills, now you're demonstrating a set of skills that they had no idea you had, either in your ability to do root cause analysis, or your ability to do a hot wash and find out, what really needs to be fixed, or to write a plan, or to write a playbook. We would call it checklists. The checklists set you free. The ability to write the checklists to help the next person be able to do exactly what you can do. The ability to communicate well with others and create that team, and bring them all in and listen to all of the ideas and then create a solution. It's a skill set. And so if you demonstrate that from your previous experience, that's a much better way of helping them understand what you're able to do. And again, you're walking the walk. Yeah, I found language also matters. What I'll do is, before I look at a company, I'll pull out the 10K or the proxy, and I'll read the strategy section about what they're trying to accomplish. And I'll read about the other leadership people in that company, and I'll even go and listen to them speak. And the reason I do that is not to stalk them and know more about them. It's because when they talk, they use a different language. And after you do that a number of times, their language becomes your language. You've already translated it in your head, almost through osmosis. And now you're using their language to communicate. There's nothing worse than explaining what you mean. It's much better to use language that helps them already understand. And that means you have to learn the new language and do the translation. Just like we learn new culture and new language when we go to other countries, think of financial services the same way. Once you learn that new language, you're communicating in a different way, and then you're demonstrating your skills in a language they understand.
Love it. So understanding their culture, right? Doing your homework associated with that, but also
Have
using.
you ever asked anybody about an acronym and they give you the words in the acronym, which means absolutely nothing? No. Tell me what that thing does.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's the same thing.
Yes, for sure. But also, using those skills you talked about, the root cause analysis and things that are just normal for our day to day. I remember when I first got here, I've been out here at the college 2 years, as you know, Zan. And I remember one of our first meetings when we were trying to solve one of our events and try to make it a better event. I said, hey, let's put together a tiger team, right? And after 32 years in the military, I think that's like a common term, right? And they're like, what is this tiger team that you speak of, right? And then at the end, I said, hey, we're going to do after action report so we can make sure we get better for the next one. And they're like, so you're right. Some things that just became normal to us, right? We can incorporate those things in the financial services, or for me, higher ed and financial services industry, to make things better. And those experiences are just simply priceless.
No, I think you heard John. So John Weiss was head of our both commercial and all of the wealth management and everything else. Now he's the commercial investment bank at Wells. And he had me talk to a large group of his folks, and we talked about hot wash. And same thing. A what? No, this is okay. Remember in Top Gun where they come in and everybody tells them what he did wrong? Well, that's not a hot wash. Yeah. Hot wash is you come in and the first thing that the person in charge does, or the person that was, running the mission does, is they go through everything that they saw that could have been better or that they didn't do right. And the only time somebody else jumps in is when they're done, if they missed it. And so owning that and owning the ability to say, I've already seen all these things and I'm going to make those better, rather than defending, no, it was good. I looked really good. No, not so much. Having that dynamic, it changed everything in his organization, because now people had, instead of the defending so that they didn't look bad, now they owned hot wash, and they would all talk about the hot wash, and they started to do the same thing we did. They absolutely owned it and were proud of the fact that they recognized it could have been better. They did something wrong. Yes. And trust me, the only people that liked that better than the leadership were the regulators, because then they self-identified and they fixed. It was great. Yes.
Yeah, no, great example, great example. So we've talked about what we can do as military members to make sure that we posture ourselves to be able to transition into financial services industry. You also have the luxury and the benefit of putting on that other hat, working for Wells Fargo, being on the board for Wells Fargo, and looking at it from the company side. So this question is more about community engagement and things that potentially companies can do for the military. So my question is, how can financial institutions engage with the military community outside of recruitment to build lasting relationships?
Yeah, it's such a terrific question, and I'm fortunate. So Richard Davis, who was U.S. Bank CEO, also serves with me on Wells, and so I get to hear him. Steve Steinauer, who is Huntington, serves on the Battelle board. So I get the benefit of their thoughts, and they are beyond belief forward thinking about veterans and what they bring in terms of extra skill sets. But I will tell you that a corporation, an organization, can't change culture. They can't direct somebody to think differently. What they can do is provide the opportunity for the people within that organization to talk and engage and think differently, both by bringing in people from the outside that change the conversation, that kind of diversity of thought and the new thinking, and also sending, we'll call them prisoner exchanges, whether it's for a day to another place, or
Yes.
whether it's as an internship. But when you exchange people and they go live in the other person's shoes for a while, and they do this at the senior level in the military, where they take everybody to Wall Street and they sit down and they look at the way that you're running either financial or investment. What we found is it's very successful to take our folks and do the same thing, and you mix it up. You take some veterans and some longtime financial services, you put them together and you send them to a place where they're going to have to engage as a team. And now they're having a different conversation, and now they listen to each other. And that changes how the organization responds. So you can send all the pamphlets in the world and you can make all of the metrics to say there will be more and stuff, but creating those opportunities for the middle sections of the company to truly engage with each other and bring in outside and inside, just terrific. It's why when you do your leadership activities, it's for a week. You've got to take them out of their current environment, put them into a new environment, hopefully with a little bit of stress in having to produce something, and now there's a communication.
No, I love that. That's better appreciation for what each other does. I'm sure that's probably some tips you did while in uniform. I remember in maintenance versus ops or support. We used to do some prisoner exchanges. For us to better appreciate and understand what each other does, right? Because
exactly.
So I love it, love it, love it, love it. Awesome. All right, Zan. So we have a few minutes remaining, and we have a couple of questions from the audience, and I think this is very important. Yes, a lot of our personnel is here on the call. Are transitioning, right? Whether it's we define transition as either a 4-year career, or 40-year career, now interested in financial services, or maybe you were 10 years at American Airlines, aircraft mechanic, and now you want to be a financial advisor, or you're a spouse of any of those. So this question is about resume and interview tips. So the question here are what are some key strategies we as veterans can do to highlight our qualifications in our resumes and interviews for a financial services job?
Yeah, so let me go back to what we talked about previously. The first one is recognize which things you did that are relevant to the people you're going to be talking to. So, in my experience, the fact that I was flying satellites, probably not super relevant. But the fact that it was a very complex set of systems and you had to work through problems and do root cause analysis to get all the way through, that is relevant.
Yes.
Flying hours, not relevant. Number of days you spent deployed, not relevant. But what you learned during that time, so some of the examples I used are things that are absolutely relevant. Find out, where they're trying to go with their strategy, because it tells you where they're trying to go. And so if you have technical expertise, or if you have innovation, if you've had to bring new technologies into your organization or into your mission, or you've had to bring different kinds of people together and create a new team, a new unit, those things will be evident by the strategy of that company that you're looking at. And so you can talk about those skills because you looked at their strategy and you think those things are relevant. The other thing you can look at is all of the news about a company, and you'll see the kinds of problems that they had. So think about your experience and say, what in my experience lets me help solve some of those problems? So instead of talking about what you did, which is certainly worthy, talk about what you can do for them in a language that is compelling to either their strategy or their problem solving.
And I think that's key. I know when I was transitioning, like you're saying, looking at their initiatives, which obviously would tell you what problems they're trying to solve, right? And seeing how you can fit into that. So knowing their mission, their vision, just like we would do going to a new organization in the military, right?
Yep.
Every time I got reassigned, you go to their mission, vision, the lines of effort, and you know what things you're going to have to help get after when you get there. So using those same skills and those same tactics.
And that belongs in your resume when you actually get to the interview, because they did ask, in the interview. Another one of my great mentors, Never make a point without a story. Never tell a story without a point. What happens in the interview is they're not testing how much you know. They're testing whether you really know it. Is it personal? Is it in your DNA? A short story about how you lived whatever you're talking about is worth its weight in gold, because it's you living and learning from that experience as opposed to something you read in a book or learned in a classroom.
Yes, no, that's perfect. And I know I learned late in my career the value of storytelling. You know, officers, I know they do it very, very well. And that's something I learned late in my career. I mean, you can get a lot across with a personal story associated with
Yep.
it versus just
And
telling
people
pure
remember it.
facts.
And if they remember
They
your story,
remember it.
they
Yeah.
remember you.
Yeah. So another question that's come in from the field is talking about networking. So just kind of setting up the question. You know, one of the things I know I was challenged with, 2 years now I'm removed from retirement, is, your network kind of goes out the window pretty quickly, right? I mean, you have a lot of, once you get out, right? You have a lot of individuals in your network when you're in uniform, and then the ones that are in retirement, you probably haven't spoken to because you were in uniform and still busy. So when you get out, your network is not as much as it used to be. So this question from the field is, what networking strategies would you recommend for us veterans looking to connect with leaders in the financial sector?
So when you read about a leader in the financial sector, do you look at what connections already exist? Who are their family? Do they have family members that have served? Do they have things that they do in the community where it is of the heart for them, and so it's their give back? Look at where their education occurred, and not just the places, but the type of education. You'd be surprised in financial services how many people come out of all different educational backgrounds. You will find, if you read the bios of others, you're going to find, that 6 degrees of freedom in Malcolm Gladwell. You're going to find the degrees of freedom where you already have connection with almost anyone you're dealing with. So that's the first level, is because you just need to find those connections, and then the rest of that comes out, because there are things that all of us share, and you'd be surprised how much. The other piece is that as a veteran, because others that served so much want to help, I get calls all the time that, somebody that's retiring, or somebody has recently retired, or somebody that needs an introduction. Because I share that connection of having served, it's a given. I'm going to help. You'll find that with anyone that has that connection to service, whether it's because they served or a family member served, or because they're part of a community that is trying to take care of somebody that has served on their behalf. So you'll find that even though you don't think you have a connection, they feel a connection to you. And then in the same way, in the communities that you want to be interviewing or changing, whether that's local physically where you live, or whether that's the financial sector, if you go to places where there is a conference or where there is a gathering, find those connections there. And not because you're looking for a job, you're looking for the connections about why you both want to be in financial services, and why you both want to serve, and what part of financial services. And those kinds of questions and those kinds of discussions create new connections, because that's what everybody's there for, is to create a community. You had a community in the military. By definition, we were brothers and sisters in arms. Trust me, every group that you touch wants that level of connection. They want to be part of a bigger team. They want Camelot. And so if you help create that, even at a conference, they will remember you because they want to be part of a bigger team, and you just became part of their bigger crowd.
That's great. No, that's perfect. And I think our last question from the field is a great way to wrap this up. We've talked about Veterans Day on the front side. We've talked about service and sacrifice within the financial services industry. And this one is more directed for you upon your time in retirement. So more of a Veterans Day kind of a final question to wrap this up, and then your closing thoughts. The question is, how have the values that you instilled during your service influence your personal and professional life after retirement, right? So how do the things that we've been talking about and that you learned, how did that culminate? And, because it's been what, 8 years or so, so since you retired, ish. How has that influenced that?
It's my touchstone. It's the way that I measure what is the how pure is this gold, how right is this decision, and so when everything else around you is spinning out of control, my raft in the middle of the storm is that set of values. And since that set of values is pretty strong, it's a great big ship. And so it's steady. And I would say that it is the one thing that when I have a tough decision or I'm in a tough situation, that set of values is your persona, it's your super suit. And so you can put on that super suit and now you can get through anything. And I have found that I have used that countless number of times. And it's an interesting thing. People come back to you and they say, how can you remain so calm? How come you're so unflappable? It's because of all of those values that we learned early on. And I got my super suit and I know what's important and I know how important it is. I know the difference between whether something is acute and whether it's chronic. Is it an immediate problem or is it a long-term problem and we really need to get after it? I know whether somebody's shooting at me or not. Perspective is everything. Values are the foundation.
And those values come out glaringly, when I met you 6 months ago. And that's why you're so deserving, both as a soldier and a citizen, soldier being a generic term for all of us in military. I understand that you're airman, but for our Soldier Citizen Award, it just speaks through to your humility. I talk about the three most important characteristics I think of leaders as being humble, approachable, and credible, and you're all three of those. Right. You're humble, very approachable, and you know your stuff, whether it's cyber, whether it's finance, whether it's just being a leader. So thank you so much for your time. Any final thoughts for the audience, Zan?
I think just two. Everybody that's participating served and or is actively supporting those who serve, either because you're family or because professionally you're actively supporting. But equally compelling, you're all the folks that are willing to operate outside your comfort zone, to move into financial services when that wasn't your lifelong. So we talked about being lifelong learners, but you're also risk takers. And that kind of person goes beyond just serving the greater good, which you did as a veteran. You're the kind of person that's going to create a greater world. So I thank you for your former service, and I thank you for who you are today to create that better world.
Awesome, great words. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're on the road, heading back to Colorado Springs here shortly. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. And also, I want to thank all of those that you have joined today.
So on behalf of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs, thank you all again for attending today's presentation. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Expand your opportunities at theamericancollege.edu.